pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, first item is public announcements and comments. Does anybody from the public wish to be heard? Rita.
Thank you, Tracy, last night for trying to get us, what do you call it, some representative from the school committee to attend to the matters here on the town side, because we haven't had anybody doing that for 2 years. I tried in the very beginning, or at some point when it became obvious, and that didn't go anywhere. So I assume I'm hoping you're going to have better luck. All right, I don't know, but then we also have to be careful what we ask for, I guess, in terms of our representatives there. I want somebody to see if I misremembered of something. I thought that at one point this board had asked and maybe even strongly suggested that the district needs to go to zero-based budgeting. And apparently they tried to do that a couple of years ago, or whenever they had the dust-up over the social workers. They tried that, and because there was such a pushback, now we're back to same old wish list and, just dream pie in the sky kind of things. And they themselves say, oh, this isn't going to fly. No, we're going to have to do something about it. Why go through the exercise and present fake figures, for God's sakes? I don't understand this at all. But what didn't somebody ask? And I think Ed had either volunteered or, somebody suggested that he would be able to help out, if need be, because it's not a very easy exercise, as I understand it, the first time around. But didn't you try to get them to do that kind of thing?
3 or 4 years ago, Bill Hinchy offered our entire finance team, and they didn't take us up on it.
No, that's it. I don't, and it's just amazing. I don't think we can go year after year like this and have these budgets, that just have no relationship to reality. I wasn't there, so I didn't happen to catch what the student population is as of October 1st. I have a feeling it probably went down total. I don't know about Yarmouth per se, but
it did. It was minus 50 from the previous year.
Oh my God! And nearly $4 million increase in the budget. Enough said.
3.1 million.
Anyone else? Okay, we'll move on to a continuation of our first public hearing, which is a Bass River Beach boat trailer parking fee increase. The first hearing was on January 7th, 2020. It was continued for a second hearing today, notice for 6 o'clock. The proposed increase is for an increase for boat trailer parking at Bass River Beach from the current fee of $8 daily and $90 seasonally to $10 daily and $110 seasonally. These increases have already been approved on March 12th, 2019 by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. The fee increase is due to increased in expenses. Does anybody in the public wish to be heard on this?
Mr. Chairman, I'll move to close the public hearing.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to close the public hearing. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Public hearing's closed. Do we have a motion on the increases?
I move that we accept the daily fee increase to $10 and the seasonal increase to $110 as proposed.
Second.
Okay. And before we vote, is there any further discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed? That passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Good job, Jeff.
Is anyone here from J&J Auto? Do you want to come up? Good evening.
Good evening.
I'll read the notice into the record, and then we'll proceed from there. The Yarmouth Board of Selectmen, acting as the local licensing authority, has received an application for a new Class II dealer license from Ekaterina and Family LLC, doing business as J&J Auto, J. Ahmad owner. The vehicles will be sold from the J-Mart property located at 1282 Route 28 in South Yarmouth. Board of Appeals decision number 4823 allows up to 8 vehicles for the sale of on the property at one time. Hearing will be held on Tuesday, January 28, 2020, in the hearing room at Town Hall, 1146 Route 28, South Yarmouth. The Selectmen's meeting begins at 6 p.m. Written comments will be accepted until 4:30 on Friday, January 24th, 2020, by the Board of Selectmen at the Yarmouth Town Hall. Verbal comments will be accepted at the hearing. You want to give us a brief presentation as to what you would like us to do?
Yeah, basically, I'm seeking to get a permit to sell vehicles at J-Mart, and I think we got approved for 8 vehicles. And they asked us to put a fence between the cottages and the property. We did that.
Okay, so the fence is already up, and I saw in your papers that you have similar businesses elsewhere, that you sell cars? What do you sell?
Yes, off Willow Street, exit 7, between Camp and Willow. It's the property half in Yarmouth, half in Barnstable. So Barnstable has a license for that property.
Okay. And how long have you been selling used cars?
20 years, 15 years.
Okay, so you have a lot of experience doing this.
Yeah.
You going to have any employees helping you with this?
Yes,
How many?
1.
Well, just one
It's only
person.
8 cars, it's not like,
And are you going to be doing repairs on the vehicles?
no, not on that.
Not on that site?
No, not on that site.
Where, if they need repairs, where are you going to do that work?
I own Yarmouth Port Save-On, end of Union Street, that's mine. And on Camp Street also.
Okay, so
we
you're going to
do
be doing them
repairs.
off-site, any repairs?
And Mobile One Express too on 28, that's mine.
Okay, does anybody have any questions?
Oh, wait, in case the public
Tracy, you have
The
questions?
public can go first.
Oh, okay. Anybody from the public want to be heard on this application? Okay, seeing none.
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to close public hearing. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right.
Make a motion to approve the application with the, incorporated with the Board of Appeals, I should say consistent with the Board of Appeals decision,
Okay, so we have a motion
limited to 8 vehicles.
to approve,
And that all,
subject to Board of Appeals
Yeah, all the-
petition number 4823, and a limit of, as per that decision, 8 vehicles, and what other?
and
Anything?
8 means 8.
And 8 means 8. That means no more than 8.
Okay.
That's what the lady's saying.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, motion second. All those in favor?
Question?
Yes, Norm.
Okay, thank you. I just taking a look at your diagram here, and you have parking area to the right of the gas station, facing the gas station.
Yeah, on
To
the
the right
right.
of the gas station,
Right.
and you also have parking area to the left.
Right.
So the vehicles for sale are going to take up which spaces then?
It's gonna be to the left, I would say. Gonna put them to the left of,
To the left.
so where the fence is, I guess.
So there'll be some here,
Yeah.
some there.
It's going to be some, like 3 or 4 to the fence, and then the rest on the right.
On the right-hand side?
Yeah.
Okay.
5
So there are, you've indicated there are no repairs going on at the station?
No repairs.
So it's, so people pulling in are going in, any other sales activity in the gas station itself?
We have a C-store,
I'm sorry, what?
convenience store.
Okay, all right. So, so you have currently 4, 8, looks like 14 spaces?
Correct.
And you'll have 6 spaces left. Is that enough for servicing the convenience store?
Yeah, usually like the customer in and out, like buy like soda or water, or like, it's not like they have to wait for the vehicle to be serviced or anything. They just go in to buy stuff.
Okay, I guess that's probably going to be the subject of the appeals committee hearing. Has that
They've
has
already
not
had
yet-
that, Norm. They've already had that hearing.
The decision's in here.
Okay.
It's the green highlighted one. That's the decision.
Okay, let me just read
The
that.
criteria is only 8 vehicles parked on site at one time. Screening fence to be installed along the westerly side of the property, that 2 trees are planted and maintained as per submitted plans, and that the landscape buffer beds be generally cleaned, improved, and maintained, and that there be 1-year review of compliance with the terms of this approval.
Okay. All right. During your current operations, how many of your spaces are utilized
Where?
at your current gas station?
We seeked like 10, and they gave us 8.
I understand,
was a-
but this is a drawing based upon your current
There was a-
utilization?
He did do U-Haul, and he had U-Haul trucks there, and they're no longer there.
Yeah,
So a
we
lot
had
of
that.
spaces were used for U-Haul prior to this.
Okay,
And so there's, 1 employee, and then,
okay.
a
All right, so
handicap.
the
and-
U-Haul operation is not going to be conducted
not.
No,
there?
it's gone.
Okay, all right, okay, thank you.
Just have one question. How many U-Haul trucks were there at a given time?
We had like 17 or 18 trucks sometimes.
You had that many?
Yeah.
Okay. Anyone else have any questions? Seeing none, we have a motion and a second. Let's vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? All right, that's granted, and good luck to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So,
And do you have your green cards?
I do.
Turn
Yep.
them in.
I'll give them to the town administrator. Nuisance property review at 228, Route 28. Mark? Good evening.
Good evening.
You want to introduce yourselves for the record, and then you can proceed and tell us what it is you'd like us to do.
Sure. Town Council Jay Tallerman.
Mark Rills, Building Commissioner.
Okay, Mark.
Yes, sir. We have received numerous complaints. I'm sure that you may have seen the property at 228 Route 28, the Old Tasty Buffet. There was a demolition permit issued for interior demolition of water damage, drywalls, ceiling tiles, and things like that. And they obviously went above and beyond that permit, so I shut the job down and have been trying to get them to do something with the building, make it safe in some way, either take it down or renovate it. And to no avail. They've not responded. They've not been responsive at all. Although I have called them a few times. I did have them in my office at one time, asking them, giving them a week or so to get back to me with what their plans were. They never followed up. So what I did receive a letter from them just about a half an hour ago, basically letting me know that they're going to have a contractor in to see me next week at some point, and that they're going to apply for demolition permit. So while this might not be necessary, any action might not be necessary, I would like permission to utilize Mass General Law, Chapter 139, should they fail to act. And basically, what I'm asking to do is give me permission to start the process, which would be to notify them that a public hearing will take place and that the Board of Selectmen will conduct that public hearing regarding the nuisance property.
Mark, when did you first contact them?
My first letter to them was August 20th, 2019.
What is the desired outcome of a public hearing with this board, of a hearing with this board? Or what are the potential outcomes?
I will
So
leave that.
Chapter 139, in our experience, there's a number of different statutory tools that various boards and officials have to abate nuisances in properties. There's a process that Mark can do through the building code statutes, but it's kind of lengthy and involved and not particularly efficient. The Board of Health has some processes too. We have found that Chapter 139 is the quickest way to get nuisances abated. It is a statute that I frankly don't think a lot of people have used as much as they should. It's the quickest. It serves to either require demolition or to abate a nuisance. It's essentially fixing nuisances in properties where there may be a health issue or a danger or an attractive nuisance. It could be to secure a site. It could be to do repairs to make it not a nuisance or a health violation. What normally happens is a hearing is scheduled. You only need 7 to 14 days notice before the selectmen. At that hearing, usually it's Mark presenting, or sometimes a fire chief or a police chief or Board of Health agent presenting why an abatement has to happen along with a desired outcome, such as fixing it, making it less of a health issue, or tearing it down. And then an order issues and is served, and there's only a 3-day right of appeal. So it's a much quicker route through rather than assembling a survey board and going through a multi-month process that Mark would have to do on his own or that the Board of Health would have to do. If the person doesn't appeal and doesn't obey that order, then the town has the right to immediately go get an injunction from the court to get that an injunction issued to order the person to do it. And if the person still doesn't do it, the town then has the right to enter onto the property, correct it themselves if they so desire, and they don't have to, and there would be a lien, an automatic lien against the property for any and all costs. So it's that back-end remedy, that lien process is similar across the building code and Board of Health processes. It's just we get there like 4 steps quicker by going through the Chapter 139 process, so it's not really drawn out.
And is it your opinion that the town has done its due diligence in terms of qualifying to this point to utilize Chapter 39 in terms of notices?
Yeah, absolutely. And there would still be one more statutory notice that would be required to this property owner. I've been advising Mark on this and what the steps could be and what you really want to take a belt and suspenders approach to the notice issue to make sure that people know what they're potentially dealing with. His last letter said, this is a direction we may go.
And they signed for this letter. We are confident that they received it?
Yes, I have a copy.
They've
of
actually
the-
responded to it already. So the next step, we hope they comply. It appears that the last letter drew them out a little, which is a good thing. And give them the 2 to 3 weeks, and if it doesn't happen, then we just send a simple notice. It looks almost like a notice for a zoning hearing or something, and they would appear here and have every right to respond to the concerns that Mark or the health agent or the fire department might put before you, whether that be written in written capacity or orally. And I could be here too for whenever that hearing is done to make sure that we hit the high marks and all their due process rights are secured.
My personal hope would be that we would be able to potentially utilize that to get them to act. However, it would be best if it was their funds that demolished this property instead of taxpayers, because potentially that could be something we would be stuck with for a very, very long time. You know, we have no idea if they ever plan to do anything or transfer the property. So our lien would be there, but the taxpayers would be
This is
out the
also maybe some incentive for them to take care of that lien, is there's a for sale sign on the property now as well.
Good.
So-
And we're confident. How would we know if the property was transferred prior to us acting? That's a concern.
We wouldn't necessarily, this wouldn't fit into that category of a sufficient notice to prevent them from selling. That
No,
said,
my concern would be that we would be demolishing a property that no longer,
well, we wouldn't, because we would have to go to court first anyway, so there
Okay.
would be service
All right. Just make it-
in that event anyway. I do think it would be difficult for them to make the normal representations under a purchase and sale, but in any event, there's multiple steps across the way where there would be notice to whoever would be the owner.
Okay.
We would keep checking with the assessors. Once you issue an order, we then have to have constable service of it upon them. So
Okay.
there are several bits of due process rights that they have
Makes me
across
feel
the
more
way.
comfortable.
This is a quicker way to address these nuisance properties without having to go through a process that could take a number of years. These things can roll out in the span of a few months under Chapter 139. I've been advising towns to consider it in appropriate circumstances since I've been town council in towns, and I've found almost universally Chapter 139, if you need an abatement of a nuisance, is the fastest and most effective way. None of them are perfect.
I know that the Attorney General has that nuisance property. Is that applicable to commercial
It's only relevant to abandoned residential properties.
residents? Okay.
And that's just as of developing a receiver to get something in shape. That's a fantastic program. We use that all the time, but it wouldn't be a good fit
Does this
here.
building have a basement?
It has a crawl space. So the dip in the
We went
roof,
by the day that they were in there with their machines, and I could not believe that they were inside with bobcats.
oh yeah,
I was like, I couldn't believe it. It's dangerous.
yes.
How long has this property been in this kind of a state that you mentioned in your letter of October 23rd?
Since early August.
Okay.
That was the day of the hurricane
The
that they were in.
process at this point is,
Right.
You're asking the select board to schedule a hearing or to say that we will schedule a hearing?
So I think that the process, based on their letter of today, is to give Mark the authority to assess whether or not they're making progress. We'll give them 30 days. They ask for 2 to 3 weeks. If in 30 days they have done nothing to abate the nuisance or diligently at least pursue necessary permits, then I think it would be Mark's looking for the authority then to get that notice out to them and get something scheduled in accord for when you guys can handle it and hear it.
Well, I'd make a motion that we authorize Mark, or the building commissioner, Mark Grills, to utilize Mass General Law Chapter 139, be exercised after a period of 30 days. If his comfort level with the situation not being rectified in that time, to start that process.
I'll second that.
Mark, all of these conditions that you talk about in your letter of December 23rd, I assume they continue to exist to the present time?
Correct.
And the temporary fencing that was installed continues to fall down?
It's laying down as of 2 days ago.
Okay. And your concern there is that it simplifies access to the building and increases the risk of health and safety of the public, including children?
That's correct.
Okay. And you also have concerns that it could place public service personnel at risk who had to respond to, say, a fire or some other emergency condition in the building,
Absolutely.
as well as the other concerns that you lay out in your December 23rd letter.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Any further questions or discussion? Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second on that?
We did.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? All right, so I hope that you get them to comply with your request. If not, then I guess the next step is a public hearing.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Right, thank you.
Thank you.
Next item is notice for 7. It's not 7, but cemetery policy for vendors. This is not a public hearing, though, right?
No, this
So-
is
No,
a
this is
board
not.
policy related to vendor obligations at the town cemeteries. We got out of the business of doing the digging some time ago, and as a result of that, it's a vended service, and the team down that runs the cemeteries have identified some problem situations that arose, and they wanted to have the board weigh in on a policy such that they could give that to the vendors.
All right, you're going to take care of this, Jeff?
Yes, absolutely. Jeff Colby, Public Works Director. The town administrator covered essentially a lot of the background to the need for this one-page document. It does not change or even conflict with the rules and regulations of the cemetery. This is a guideline, a document that we can hand out to contractors. As the town administrator mentioned, town staff does not provide burial services anymore, but we provide oversight and guidance. We've run into some challenges over the last couple of years since others are doing that with regards to the condition that the cemetery plots have been left in open holes and time in which the excavation occurs while other services are occurring, things like that. Those are all items that are addressed by one of the paragraphs within the policy to the vendor. So this is something that we can hand out to the contractors. We'll send this out if the board does approve of this. To all of the vendors and contractors that do burial services within the town of Yarmouth, just to give them guidance with regards to providing that service. Because of the history in dealing with cemetery changes, we wanted to make sure the board was supportive of this before we sent that out. But again, it does not change any of the guidelines, any of the rules or regulations which are posted on the town website. It's a supplement to that to provide guidance to the contractors. So with that said, I'd be happy to answer any questions. Each one of these items on this list is a result of something that a contractor or vendor has done that we wanted to be clear that was unacceptable, and here's the remedy for that.
I'll make a motion to approve the Town of Yarmouth cemetery policy for vendors.
Have a second?
I'll second it. I do
Okay.
have a question.
Go ahead, Norm.
Jeff, what is the penalty?
Any penalties, I would refer back to the rules and regulations with regards to operation within the cemetery. And there are elements associated with things that can be enforced, if you will. Even the rules and regulations, it's only a 4-page document, doesn't really spell out penalties per se. But those rules and regulations are which I would point back towards as far as any repercussions. It does reference in the rules and regulations that the cemetery staff can take certain actions if there's something happening. But this document that I'm looking for your support tonight is simply guidance or guidelines for the contractors. If they're in violation of some of these, there are elements within the rules and regulations that give remedies associated with that, but this just sets the framework or the table, the expectations, if you will, for the contractors.
Are there problems that exist right now that these guidelines, the supplemental policy is kind of aimed at? Are there things that are bothersome that are going on by these contractors that have prompted you to do this?
Yeah, I briefly alluded to one earlier, and I did bring a picture if the board would like to take a look at it. But just whether it's a cremation location or a burial site just being left either open or in a unappropriate condition, not properly loamed or seeded, concrete left, throughout the site, just general cleanup. Those things are happening on a regular basis. What happens is the cemetery crew, there's really just a foreman, a one-person entity at this point, that's the cemetery division in Yarmouth, will go and kind of follow up and clean up, but that's a significant amount of work that really shouldn't be needed if the contractors were given, proper guidance and proper oversight with regards to, the way it should be left. We've worked with the contractors kind of in a verbal arrangement and discussions and providing input, if you will, but we've wanted to clarify that. And from time to time, there's new vendors that will come in. And so this guidance document will provide some input for them.
Can I amend my motion?
Can I just ask a question?
Go ahead. I have a comment.
Are they all insured? Do you have insurance certificates on everybody that work on
Yes.
town property? Perhaps we need to consider putting a fee into a cleanup if the town has to, that's for another date, because I'm sure it'd be a new fee, it would have to be advertised and such, but perhaps if the town has to do that kind of work, then the contractor should be charged for it.
That's certainly something we can look at, absolutely.
My amended motion, Mr. Chairman, was going to include a 6-month review provision, and if at that time we find that these guidelines are not being effective, we may want to consider implementing a penalty or a fine for noncompliance, but initially just to accept these with a 6-month review sometime this summer.
I would accept that amendment.
So Norm, you withdraw your original second and second the amended motion?
Yes.
Correct, okay. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed? All right, that passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair.
Next item is ME Small Elementary School discussion, which is a 7:15 item.
So I sent to you that the engineering document that was received by my office. I have copies of it if anybody needs a copy of it. But because of the significant magnitude of what was in the report and the ongoing issues the board has had with that, we decided to bring it forward for a discussing topic because we need to get further guidance as to where you want to go with it.
Well, I know the date of the assessment that we were looking at was old,
October 2016.
2016.
3 years.
So I think that, and I know that the school, have you had any dialogue with the school district about it? Because they had recently voted on hiring somebody to reanalyze
Yeah,
the
I was
capital.
aware that they were doing that, and I also believe that Mr. Grills and his team is going to go through it for code-related issues as well.
You mean the changes since?
Yeah, since, yeah.
We don't have
I don't have any
anything tonight?
detail on that yet, no.
So what's the purpose of this discussion at this point?
Well, there had been commentary from the individual board members that they wanted to bring this up, and one of the things I would mention to you as you ponder this is that if they were to get a SOI from MSBA and that was to participate in a roof project, and at a time in which the financing for the roof project is still active and it ceases being a school, we'd be on the hook to pay the difference on that, more than likely. That's been my experience with MSBA. Also understanding that based on the recent school building committee meeting, it didn't sound like the Matakes building was going to get even bid out till about this time next year, if that's not correct. Eric, that might have been the same information you get. So that is a long way to go before we would even probably be considered for funding for that building. So that just was some items to consider. So what do we do with this rooftop in these intervening years? And does $50,000, say, of improvements that are scheduled really do much of anything other than cosmetics at this point?
So if we were to really look into something at this point,
Yeah.
who would that be on our dime?
I think that it would have to be on our dime. We are technically the owner of the building. It is out of lease, for sure. The report is 4 years old. I can't imagine it got any better in 4 years. So one of the things that we could do is request money from, I could get an estimate to have our own, one of our own on-call engineers give us an estimate as to another updated assessment, but if the school department's already going to go through with that, we could wait for that to go through. But if we don't do something about it, it's just going to continue to get worse, for sure. But you know, so at some point, there's roughly an estimate of $2 million out there. Going through the normal school building renovation methods just isn't going to get that situation fixed, that I think is acceptable to any of the board members.
Well, I think since 2016, and what I said previously, since the damage, any potential water damage since then, the other issues that have been created, I would ask that we talk to the school administration to see their timeline for how long it will take for them to do their analysis. And if it's not, in a shorter period of time, perhaps we could, I think we have to do our own. I think we have to know. I'm not sure how long that would take and what the cost would be, but I really don't know how we can move forward with anything without knowing the cost. I mean, because potentially there's we may have to look at other options for the children in that school, or ask the school district to look at those options.
I'm trying to think through, some of the worst case scenarios. I think the worst case scenario is that the roof may be rotten. I think the worst case scenario is it collapses, and we have children or others injured in the process. I mean, 4 years, and it was in lousy shape at that point. Just having the school committee, frankly, say, "Oh well, we're going to get another look at it." I mean, I'm incredulous.
Is there a way our team can go out there and verify its structural safety in a short time?
Our people, you would not, for liability reasons, want our people to we're not
Structural engineers?
Yeah, we're not structural engineers. What I would recommend is, and I can do this rather quickly because we started the process before we got the report, was to get quotations from our list of on-call architect and engineers to get us what it would cost to do a new assessment, and I can report back to you what that dollar value would be, and then we can discuss how it was that could be financed.
But even to Norm's point, more, I think, important than that, how do we have faith that the safety is, that it's structurally sound in the short term while we go through this process?
Mr. Grills had indicated to me that he was going to himself and his electrical and wiring inspector review the property for an immediate safety situation. Okay. And depending upon how that would go, would determine what the next step would be on that topic.
I guess I'm concerned about the pace.
If Mr. Grills and his team feels that there's a public safety issue there, then they will make the appropriate order at that time.
I guess going back to what you were talking about earlier, Dan, in terms of the Matakey's funding situation, and given it'll be a year from now before we get the go-ahead with construction on the Station Avenue School, and
in 18 months, maybe 15 months after that is the construction
right. So
timeline.
we're talking another 2 to 3 years.
That's correct.
Before we would see any eligibility for new funding.
If you decided to go down that road, yeah.
Now, are there any other provisions of funding having to do with emergencies
I'm not aware of any, but we can certainly, one of the things that, as part of the NOI or SOI process, it didn't seem to register on MSBA's radar screen as to, importance for funding, so we could, based on whatever new generated report we get, we might be able to take advantage or some opportunity to apply for that fast track. I'm never going to say no to something, but I think probably it would be a heavy lift to find some outside funding outside the normal provisions.
So even if we get an opinion today that, well, the roof looks okay today, 2.5 years from now is a whole other situation.
Well, they put in a statement of interest every year. They have for several years from MSBA, so they will continue to do that. They have not been successful so far.
Well, I wonder at what level they've been doing that. And I guess I just thinking about things that I've read in the regulations, and I thought that there were expedited applications.
They have something called the Accelerated Repair Program. I don't necessarily believe that would be if your school district was looking at a variety of different buildings to, usually it's rooftops, boilers, and windows that they have accelerated repair on. It's something, again, without having a detailed structural report in front of us right now that's not 4 years old, it's hard to go up to Boston to find out what avenues we'd have under that program.
Weren't windows, didn't we talk about windows on this building 6, 7, 8 years ago?
Matikes, I think.
Yeah, I think there were window issues in this building.
Small too.
Yeah.
Well, to put in their statement of interest, they had to have compiled some documentation to the state, which maybe we need to.
Well, that's what I'm saying, so what you do is you go back with a more robust case, perhaps, and that's supported by recent engineering analysis. And if they would channel us into accelerated repair, that is an option that could be pursued.
Okay, so until we get a sense as to what level of urgency there is in terms of safety considerations, there's not really much we could do in terms of
What's your suggestion?
Financing.
What's the suggestion, Dan? Let the school perform the evaluation, or send our Westford, is it Westford and Sampson that you'd send over there?
No, it would all depend on who could turn it around the quickest amount of time. Before I'd answer that, if I get satisfactory answer from the school department that it was going to be done in an expeditious fashion, sooner rather than later, I'd feel like that's a good avenue to go. But if I didn't feel like that was what was going to happen, then I'd recommend to you that we go and we pick a vendor right now on our list and who can get something turned around in the soonest possible time frame.
I thought you had mentioned at the last meeting that the company that was doing the DPW work might be available to perform this for us.
Oh, well, they do this kind of work. It would just be a matter of they're tied up on our grant project now too, the local engineer for Workshop Road and Fire Station 3. I mean, a lot of it depends upon when you start talking, when you start talking about, I'd like to have this turned around in 2 weeks or 3 weeks. It really becomes a matter of how much labor power can you put on it. You do the field work, and then you got to crunch all the data when you get back. And, I don't know what the workload is in front of that team right now. Plus, they're also doing the peer review for us on the DHY costs, so that's taking up some engineering bandwidth for them. But there's other firms on the list that are more than capable of doing this work.
Well, let's take the least expensive path and let's let the school do it first.
Well, I'd only be comfortable doing that
If we know the timeline.
I'll find out the
If Mark goes
timeline.
over there and says we can afford to wait, that's, I don't want to but for something happens,
Right.
What is, are we, given the fact that there has been no lease renewal, are we operating under the terms of the existing lease on a
At-will basis,
at-will basis?
right.
Generally, that's the case when a lease expires,
Yeah.
and you continue month to month. It's usually on the same terms and conditions as the written lease, except that you don't have a definite period of time that you're leasing it for.
I mean, I think, we need to have a conversation with the school district. I would like to know what their overall strategic plan is, and in an emergency, how that they would react, where they would school those children, what their plan would be. Because I think we should, you know, as I said before, we don't have the information really to know, but if we're looking at millions and millions of dollars, which I suspect we're going to find.
2.2 wasn't the number
Well, that was,
2.2?
but that was
4 years
just for
ago.
the roof. That was before any water infiltrated anything for 4 years. I mean, I don't know. I'm
3 to
speculating.
6% more maybe since that number, and then any like code upgrade issues that come off from the rooftop would have to be addressed, electrical and whatnot. So it could be a number substantially more than that, sure.
So at what point in time at what number do we make a decision about the use of the building long-term and an alternate plan? So I think that should be a conversation that should be started,
Yeah, no
knowing that either way, we're going to be looking at some expense.
The problem is you have no idea what the future holds. You know, it's going to be at least 3.5 years before we can even hope that building could start to be looked at. And until then, do you throw good money after bad?
Well, that's my
It's a
question.
lose-lose situation. You know, it's unfortunate that there's kids and teachers, you know,
In there.
in that building, but it's a
What's
sticky
the-
situation.
What's the date of occupancy projected for Station Avenue?
Well, I think if I recall correctly,
Is it 2022?
It's 2.5 years.
it's at least 2.5 years, because it goes to bid, I think, about February this time. There's like a 60-day due diligence, and they get started in probably April of 2021, and then it's 15 months.
So, I mean, worst-case scenario is that Matikes is vacated, and we have to take the kids from ME Small and put them into Matikes for some period of time.
That sounds like a sound
Potentially.
plan, yeah. And then
Yeah.
you decide, what do you want to do with that building? You know, I
Right.
mean, is it really, for repurposing purposes, worth spending $2.5 to
Right.
$3 million?
Yep.
You probably knock it down for 100,000 or less, maybe, you know,
Mhm.
so.
You
Well,
know,
these are
that's-
conversations, and as Peter said in her comments last night, I had asked for, you know, a liaison. We have these discussions, and it's on our agenda, and we don't have anybody here to bring back this information to the school or have that communication. I think it's unfortunate. We can't have this conversation by ourselves, because it's not in it's our building, but the picture's not in our control. And we need to start having these conversations about what the future plan is. So maybe we need to officially ask them what
Well,
their
I'll
future.
follow up with them this week, yep. And try what, see what I get for an answer for you. Once I get it, I'll send it off to you.
Yeah, I guess, Tracy, it's a question of, do we put it in writing, or do we, you know, and, you know, I guess that's, is that what you were really
Well,
getting at? I mean, you
Yeah,
know, it's a
I
valid
mean,
question.
I think it's important, because
Yeah.
it's a discussion that we all need to know before we invest millions of dollars in a building, if there are alternate plans for the education and for where they might be and how it might be configured. I would like to know about that.
So step one, get Mark and his team over there, and step two, communicate with the school.
Yeah, I mean, if you wanted to
administration.
put a motion together tonight, you know, directing me to correspond with school administration to such that by the next meeting night, we have a definitive plan of action from the school department on ME Small. I mean, that's certainly
I think we need to get on formal record with them on our level of concern. I think that we don't know whether they're going to watch this meeting or not.
Yeah, understood.
And I think that, given the fact that it's been 4 years since the report was generated, I think it's high time we express our concern over it.
So I'll make the motion, what Dan said.
Yeah.
So you
Repeat
make,
what you said, Dan?
I'll make a effort to direct the town administrator to send a correspondence to the school department relative to the future plans for Emmy Small with that information reportable back to this board at the next meeting, February 11th.
And can we also,
I don't think they're going to be able to respond.
School administration can, if they've got something on record, they can tell you.
and we can also make arrangements for Mark and his team to get in there
Yeah,
and
oh,
do
yeah,
an evaluation?
yeah. Mark had already spoke to me about that, yeah.
I'll second that.
I just think that the letter should
Be
lay
strongly
out.
worded.
Well, I think it should lay out our current dilemma on the record now, that, we need to make sure that there's a plan in place, and that, we're concerned for the safety, and we need to expeditiously get an answer on this, and make sure we, like I said before, not throwing good money after bad. If a price tag comes with this engineering that is something we determine to be, all of us determine not to be the best interest, that she has a plan.
And if you want to make a comment about the fact that this should have been incorporated into the Matikes building, you can throw that in there too.
Try to keep it simple.
Yeah, first things first, yeah.
okay, so we have a motion and a second that Dan will talk to the,
I'll send a letter.
we'll correspond with the school department about the issues that we discussed here tonight, including plans and assessment of the present condition of the building. And I think to Eric's point, whether they have any thoughts or if any consideration has been given to using Matikes as an interim school, while they're waiting to get some funds to replace the existing Emmy Small School, because I think it's going to be a tear down in the last analysis. I don't think you're going to be able to rebuild that building any more than you were, from a standpoint of feasibility, able to rebuild Matikes, or the tech school for that matter.
I'd also like to request if they have any information on, or they have, what's the word I'm looking for? If they have obtained health and wellness, or what do they call it, air quality conditions in the past 4 years of that school, in addition to structural assessments.
All right, so we have the motion second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? So that's unanimous, Dan. Thank you. Next item is golf RFP concessions, meaning the food and beverage, right?
Right. So, last week, we sent to you a package of the proposed documents that'll go out for advertising. I want to thank Rich and his procurement team. It's going through a procurement process that, as you can see, is pretty detailed as it relates to ranking criteria and whatnot. So it took a fair amount of time to configure and author all those documents. So, well, at this point, what we wanted to do is get a sense from you that we've answered the questions that you wanted on this particular topic, and if you were good with that, we would work to get that advertised shortly after this meeting, such that it can be out on the street and be reviewed by prospective respondents, and a decision would be in place potentially with the highly advantageous respondent to be up and running by April 1st.
Correct.
Yeah. Just to let you know also, we will continue on a parallel track golf operations to do the normal preseason things we do to operate the concessions, just in the event that this doesn't come to fruition. So we're not going to stop doing what we would normally do to entertain this. We're going to do it parallel track.
Rich, I noticed you split the RFP down into two components. One is what a potential person operating the concessions has to offer the town in that regard, and the second is the financial piece. And I guess you're going to review the first one first
Oh,
before
right.
you get into the costs analysis.
So in a request for proposal process, it's two sealed bids. One is for evaluation purposes to determine the highest ranked or most advantageous proposer regardless of price. And then once you've determined that without the influence of knowing what their price might be, then you open the price proposals separately.
Is that fairly typical, or is that just something
It's
that you
required.
decided to do? It's required?
Yeah, under an RFP process, it's required. You're not required to do an RFP, but if that's the
Once you
reason.
do an RFP, you have to do it that way?
Right, and that would be why you would do an RFP, because you don't want to necessarily settle on the lowest bidder, because you might be interested in working relationship with someone that has something that no one else can offer, or understands your needs better than someone else, or can demonstrate they're going to perform better than someone else. Which is the point of, you'll notice in that first part of the RFP had several evaluation criteria, and so we'd have a evaluation committee that would rank those responses and come up with those respondents that were offered the best plan to address the requirements of the concession.
Can I ask one question?
Tracy?
The only thing I didn't see, and maybe it was in there, was when we talked about this last time, there was some hesitant about doing this based on the potential disruption. How was that addressed in the RFP?
So we would be pursuing this as a license agreement. A license indicates that make sure I have it right.
I think we're still working with Jay on license versus contract arrangement. From my recollection of the document was that there was an opt-out provision if Bass River went down. So there's a period of time in which the contract provision would be good for, and there was a provision in there that if during that time Bass River went dark because of construction, that they wouldn't be held responsible for that. But they would need to know this going in so they could put together their numbers. Is that?
So I believe it was 1 year, April 1, starting 1 year guaranteed. A second year at our option, and a third year at mutual option. And so if we had to shut down operations, we'd have the ability to do that under the contract language. But a license, regardless of a contract language, a license is always at will, and we can revoke a license subject to a license requirement. And so we have a couple ways out of it.
Well, so I guess this is a little bit different than the last one, because the last one, there was a lot of upgrades that the vendor undertook. I'm assuming that we're not looking for much in terms of upgrades. If that, I mean, how would you expect some? That's a risk.
Yeah, I would expect we wouldn't get, given the terms of the potential terms of the arrangement, you wouldn't get a lot of upfront investment. But
Right.
we are offering facilities with the fully equipped and ready to go. So there might that would be part of our evaluation criteria. What is a proposer proposing to do?
Okay.
And maybe they're willing to take the risk.
I think it's in better shape than it was
Yeah.
some years ago, from my
Okay,
recollection. Yeah.
so we're leaving the equipment, we're not expecting them to
No.
come in with their own equipment. Our equipment will be available to them. Okay.
I think the problem with what happened in the past is there was some work in lieu of rent provision, and the work far exceeded the amount of rent. So that, I think that was the bone of contention between the vendor and the town. So as long as we're not doing something similar to that again.
You know, one of the things we're very clear about in any bid process is making sure that everybody's bidding on the exact same thing, and that we're the ones determining what we want their response to look like as far as what they're offering us. We don't want these far afield, you know, in most cases, you know, very rare circumstances, there's anything far afield of, you know, we got to evaluate what the actual value of what you're receiving from somebody is. No, we've got a bid pricing form that says, what's your price for year one, what's your price for year two, what's your price for year three. It's payable monthly on the first of each month, period.
I guess I've got a couple of questions.
Go ahead, Norm.
I don't have any objections to this. I think we need to move ahead quickly with the food and beverage RFP. I guess my question has to do with the other priorities and what we've agreed on as priorities with the point-of-sale system. When the Gulf Enterprise Committee was before us on December 5th, they recommended that both the point-of-sale system and the food and beverage system would be done quickly. And the point-of-sale system has really been under discussion for at least 6 months, if not longer than that. You know, my assessment of that is, you know, that's really needed to effectively market and operate our courses. You know, the existing vendor is having more and more difficulty. The leadership of the company has vacated, and I'm not sure what its status will be. And I guess secondly, you know, the GEC talked about maintaining the current Director of Golf organization and supplementing the experience of Scott Gilmore in particular with some marketing assistants and other assistants. And, you know, I don't think our board had decided on what direction, had not made a definitive decision with regard to that. And but we had the recommendations of the GEC on that issue. So I guess I'm looking for, you know, some discussion of those issues at the same time.
I could report back on the point of sale, working with Scott on that. He did previously pull together some information as to what we'd be looking for, the features and the functionality. There are some complications to how to go about procuring this. Not to get too in the weeds on this, but there's a big difference between buying a license and applying it to the PCs, those licenses. That's something you own, versus a per-month subscription-based service is a totally different type of procurement and different requirements, and a different operating environment as well. And so Scott pulled together some information that I'm going to help him go through, and we anticipate getting that out the next few weeks as well on the point of sale.
Okay, what would be the time of installation?
Well, that would be part of what we're going to put in the RFP, and we have to see what the respondents provide for. But the hope would be we'd be doing it this spring.
Okay, you know, again, you know, once we get beyond April 1st, the time frame in terms of availability of staff, given the demands of ongoing operations, gets more and more difficult. You know, I guess I'm really concerned about where we're headed with this. and the time frame that we're working with. Likewise, with regard to the organization structure, I don't think our board has given direction with regard to what the organization structure should look like.
Is there going to be any follow-up report on those two matters that Norm raised, the point-of-sale system and the organization structure?
Well, as far as the point-of-sale system, that has to get in position to do an advertisement. Rich just kind of outlined that. That would be implementation of a software system, so it wouldn't really affect the on-the-course personnel. It would affect the folks that are running the dollars and cents operation in the clubhouse. So it would be a scenario that there would be vendor-supported training, and to some large degree, the customer experience wouldn't be affected by that, nor the rank-and-file employee. As far as organizational structure, the only significant changes that we have would be a golf operations assistant that was left vacant, and that was repurposed for business development, if you will, and marketing support. It has not been hired. The second part about that is the present golf director is in interim status or acting status. His former position as superintendent has not been filled. Other than that, there's been no change to the structure of golf and its management of any significance. So part of what we were looking to do based on the process of hiring National Golf is bring some finality to the department and getting it to the point where we have a full-time, fully appointed director of golf that can make those other decisions as it relates to implementation of the POS and what to do with the vacant position that's been identified. So we started the process of working with the union to hire the director's position.
I'll make a motion that we allow the town to move forward with the RFP as presented.
The second motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to proceed with the food and beverage RFP. Does anybody have any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? So that carries unanimously.
I think the definition of where we are and how we're proceeding with the director of golf position is critical for the golf operations. The perception among many of the golf members is just up in the air at this point. People don't understand what's going on or why. There's, I think, tremendous support for Scott Gilmore, and I think that's important for us to reinforce going forward. I think to undermine that at this stage is an issue. And I'm not sure why. I understand there's been a request for applications for the director of golf position, and I don't know that this board has acted on that.
The position of director of golf is a appointment by the town administrator, and then at that point in time in which I would make that appointment, then the board has 15 days from the date in which I submitted to you for a 4/5 vote to overturn that. So that position is my appointment. And I think I've been pretty clear, with all due respect, about what the future is and where we need it to go. And part of the process that we're in now is the NGF work has been done. A 5-year pathway of success has been charted now. And, one of the problems that we have with with golf, without having it, you talk about, an in-between situation, not having an actual director that's been endorsed by the board through the appointment of the town administrator, I think is more problematic to the candidate than anything else would be. And there's a lot of business that needs to be had. It is a union position. The union has reminded me of that, and they would like to see a final position as well on that. So this is the process that we go through. It's a public, paid-for appointment, and I think going through selecting or getting resumes from an advertisement is a process that the public would want to ensure that gets done. And it's a normal course of the way we've hired people, Norm.
Well, I think the courses have operated very successfully in the last year under the leadership of Mr. Gilmore, and I think that he and his organization, as it exists now, enjoy considerable support among the golf community, certainly. And, I, for one, as a golfer, and secondly, as a board member, feel that we need to provide him with the support to succeed going into the future. And I don't understand why we need to go through a whole interview process. The GEC, in fact, talked about that. It said, why would we go out and hire a golf director, spend another $100,000 to $150,000 when we're already constrained by our financial resources, when we have a director that enjoys substantial support in the community?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry, Norm, I can only listen to this for so long. First of all, this isn't on our agenda. Second of all, anything that we're doing is no disrespect to Mr. Gilmore, and I feel like that support that you ask for him is the same support we ask for our administrator, and he has a job to do, and I feel like he's being pushed into a certain position, and I think it's wrong. I think we need to let him go through his process, and then we'll deal with it when it gets to the point. But I already got your email. I think we all got your email, and I feel like you're trying to push the town administrator into making a particular decision, and I think it's wrong. That's my opinion.
All right, anybody else on the golf RFP concessions?
The concessions we've already voted on.
Okay, but that was the item that we started off with. All right, let's move on to 8:15, closed 2020 ATM warrant.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There is an updated document for your review of proposed articles. This is was worked on as late as this afternoon. So this replaces what you presently have in your packet. So,
Can you just tell us briefly what changed, so?
yeah, Rich was working on this, so I'll have him walk you through the changes. Some of it was just language cleanup to make things a little bit easier to understand.
Did you have, last night at the school committee, Mr. Plath?
I heard about that just this afternoon.
Okay. He was asking to see if you had talked to Liz about a placeholder. I'm not sure if their board took a position.
I spoke to Liz later today. This is the day in which we make the closure. We had no placeholder for it. It was not on our radar screen, and my conversation to Ms. Sullivan was that, having been down this road before, I would say that maybe we ought to have a two-town dialogue plus the school committee on something that important.
What was the issue?
Well, I'm not sure that it's been
Pay us
discussed.
for the feasibility
Oh,
study?
I asked him about that last night. I was going to bring that up under other items, but what he was hoping for is just a one article amendment about his issue that he had before, where by a majority vote of both boards, an amendment could be brought forward. He wants that on this town meeting. I think he's pushing for it in Dennis. But I don't know if it's been discussed by.
Doesn't it have to be brought forward by the school committee?
I think what he was looking for was for both boards to support it and ask them to bring it forward. He was looking for, what's that? For an amendment to the regional agreement.
For what?
To amend the regional agreement to say that amendments can be brought forward by a majority vote of both boards and not just the school committee as it says now, which is something that was previously discussed, and I don't know, I know it's late in the game, but he asked me to bring it up, that he would like our boards to have a discussion about it, but.
That came up in the negotiating sessions, and I don't think there was any really divergence of opinion either way. Both boards seemed to think that was reasonable. But of course, you got to get the school committee to agree as well. Because the contract as it stands only authorizes them to propose amendments.
So I think he was going to be asking, and the only reason I brought it up tonight at all is because we're closing the warrant. So, and I just heard about it last night, so.
I suppose if you wanted to make number 35 that topic, that's up to you.
No.
I mean, there's no really impending reason to do that. We could always do it in the fall fall meeting if they move forward with it or express an interest of moving forward with it.
You have to wonder what the motivation behind the request is, though. I'm trying to think about what is the urgency?
Well, I think what
Got to be something.
I think well, I don't know what the urgency is in making the amendment, but I think the rationale when we were discussing the contract was that the towns are bearing the financial burden of the operating budget of the schools and the capital budget of the schools, so they should be able to initiate amendments and not just simply be waiting for the school committee to take action in a particular matter. And that makes a lot of sense.
I actually think it's a good thing to do.
Let's take it up after we get reimbursed.
Yeah, that's my question. Number 21, what
Let's, Rich, you were going to, well, you were absent from the room. Dan said you were going to show us what matters were updated, what changes were made between
from what was in the packet?
The warrant that we had in the packet and the one that was just handed out to us.
What's listed on what was handed to you is Article 10. It previously said free cash, and now it says free cash and available fund utilization. In the event there's any unspent articles or other types of funds that we want to utilize, we could reserve the right to do that.
Where would available funds come from?
Unspent articles, for example, the common one.
Excuse me?
An unspent article from a prior year.
An article where there was an appropriation, but it wasn't used or wasn't used wholly.
Why wouldn't that be part of free cash anyways?
Because it hasn't been closed out. It's still authorized for a particular purpose. And if we get to the point where, because of our constraints that we think we need to do something and because the other funds aren't available to do it, we might have to utilize something else. We could reappropriate it for something else. But of course, we'd have to go through town meeting. So that just preserves that option. I mean, we're not contemplating that happening, but if we need it to, we have that option.
We're
Town meeting
required
approves
of
it.
2 years
Yeah, we have to do it.
to bring it up to you one way or the other. Either retire it or repurpose it. So we go through this on every spring basis.
And also attempt to consolidate some articles. I mean, some towns would have a separate article for every single reappropriation, and if you want to have a warrant of 50 articles, we could do that, but trying to consolidate these into one discussion. And usually we go line by line anyway, so. Just to be clear, on Article 18, I don't think this is a change. As a CPA surcharge reduction or exemption, you preserve your option for whichever one you would like to pursue.
That's the same.
20 says just removing, you preserve your option, wastewater design, engineering, or construction. That could be any form of funding or not, or it could be a bond authorization. It's not beholding you one way or the other. I think those are the main changes.
What is 21? I guess I don't understand what that article is.
So we voted for the full 750, we didn't use it, because we got
We
reimbursed.
only use 418.
We actually got a bond authorization for $750, and we paid for it with free cash. And we don't need to borrow $750 for that purpose any longer, so we're going to just clean it up and remove it off the books, so to speak.
So we actually paid what?
So the article would, what, reduce the amount to 418?
No. We have a bond authorization. We are authorized, the town is authorized to issue debt of $750,000 for the purposes of a school feasibility study. We haven't borrowed $750, and we're not planning on borrowing $750,000. So we don't need that authorization on the books anymore, so we're voting to rescind it.
Okay, so it's just the borrowing authorization.
That's right.
Okay.
Is the 418 the amount we've actually spent?
I believe that is, yeah.
And what is our plan to get 35% back?
So
Supposed
there
to
was
be on
some,
on their warrant.
yeah, there was some discussion at the school committee about the reimbursement and how, what agreement the reimbursement percentage
Because it's a 2 or 3% difference.
fell under. And they were going to look
Sure.
into it. When I asked Jim last night, he said he was going to bring it up because he had forgotten about it, so.
I spoke with Chris Flanagan at the MMA conference, and he indicated that there would be an article on the warrant.
In those series of CPA articles, there was one elimination. An acquisition article wasn't needed, so that was removed from your list.
I'll make a motion to close the warrant.
Second?
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor? Say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? That passes unanimously. Warrant's closed.
I'd just like to say if there's not a splash pad by the next warrant, I will petition my own.
Need help from the
I'm just letting
pickleballers.
everyone know now, so it's not a
Yeah,
surprise.
that's
We'll
right.
put it on fall.
Put it next to a pickleball
First
court.
article.
We can cool off
Play
after a hot
pickleball
match.
on it.
Yep,
Yeah, you could cool
Okay.
off after a heated pickleball match.
that's what Dan just said.
Okay, the next item, the annual review is going to be put over to Dan. I hope you're available on this date. It's going to be on Monday, February 3rd. We're going to have,
I think we're having a meeting that till the 11th.
no, but it's going to be a special meeting.
Special meeting? Okay.
We wanted to do an executive session at 4 and a regular meeting at 4:30. Doing the, we have an executive session, I believe, with the board and the town administrator. Am I correct on that, in the executive session? And then do the evaluation and open meeting at 4:30.
Is this on the 3rd?
Yeah. If you're available, are you available on the 3rd?
Barring any unforeseen calamity of circumstance.
Okay. They didn't want to wait until the next meeting. The board felt it was something we should wrap up as soon as possible.
Is that executive session at 4?
For executive session, open meeting at 4:30. The executive session will be on the TA contract discussions. The open meeting will be on the TA annual evaluation.
Okay.
Right?
And Mike, have you mentioned the 1 o'clock meeting?
Yeah.
Okay.
We're going to meet at 1
Yeah.
Friday. Okay.
So February 4th is on this calendar as
It's
a,
wrong.
No, it's wrong. It was, it has not, that joint meeting is now the 10th.
the 10th of February?
Yeah. The joint wastewater RAC meeting, workshop. It's a workshop meeting. Just on wastewater.
And what is that regarding? I guess I'm unclear. Who's?
There was a request, I think, by Selectman Talley to have a workshop on wastewater. So this is like, you should have an update on the peer review process, our last information as it relates to cost recovery, going into a proposed tri-town at the end of February, and the latest with the agreement language.
We were also going to discuss the, some of the town meeting, the CPA surcharge.
Right.
Were we going to discuss the Water Resource Enterprise Fund and the wastewater reserve funding?
If you want to, we can,
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to, I noticed on the calendar, it said that it was limited to 2 hours, and that would be great if it were, but I just want to have a holistic discussion about all things wastewater, because I'm not wired to do them a piece here and a piece a month or two from now. And
When is that?
10th.
I thought the 10th was our joint meeting.
Yeah, that is. That's the workshop with the rec.
That's the wastewater workshop.
7 o'clock?
6.
Town hall?
Town hall. Unless you want it to be 7 o'clock, but I would think probably 6.
No, I'm just trying to keep my calendar straight, because I have it in here. She invited us to the 4th.
Yeah, it was a long time ago. There was a date thrown out there at the 4th,
Yeah.
but it ended up being the 10th.
So you're saying additional conversation among us?
Well, it was the intent to kind of have a review of all of the things that will be coming up for wastewater that we need to consider. There's 4 to 6, topics in there that I wanted to have a general overview of, just to kind of get it all into one meeting rather than doing bits and pieces here and there, because, it was my feeling that there are still some decisions we have to make.
I agree, but I just didn't know how that was planned to go with. So you want RAC to be involved in?
Yeah, they're here. They're going to be there.
Okay.
So who was doing an agenda on that?
We'll do the agenda on it.
So I had in mind all the things Selectman Tully had mentioned as topics. The RAC is meeting on February 3rd, and this will be a topic of their discussion. We can get an agenda out through Dan or Linda shortly thereafter, and get any final feedback if you need it. But I think we're on the same page as to what you're looking for, including the not mentioned golf discussion. Dave Young is planning on attending as well, and ought to have some updates on that topic, as well as updates on some questions regarding what happened with bidding in Harwich, and some of feedback, follow-up on that as well. There are provisions throughout the cost estimates for those types of scenarios, so you can comment on that, but those are also things that the peer review will be considering. And point of information, the Weston & Sampson, the firm doing the peer review, will be in Town Hall on Thursday to meet with our DHY working group members to solicit feedback as for their consideration of the agreement and of the costs. So if there's any questions from our working group, that Weston & Sampson can consider those. It will be in this room if anyone's interested in attending at 9 o'clock.
Okay. We're going to get to the agenda review. I don't know if there'll be any more to add, but we'll get to that momentarily. But
We skipped ahead.
we're going to go to board and committee actions. Approval of minutes, September 10, 2019, September 17, 2019.
So moved.
Second.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. Any discussion on that? All those in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed? So that passes unanimously. And then we go back to upcoming agenda review. Is there anything else? We're going to have, after the wastewater meeting, that we're going to meet on the 11th. We have the Irish Fest use of the drive-in site, weights and measures,
One thing I'd like in the future is, I think, based on Dan's comments from last week, I think we need to have a discussion of the BSU building.
The what?
The BSU, Bridgewater.
Oh, an update on that?
Well, I mean, he kind of gave an update, but I don't know, I guess my vision of what I thought would be there and what's potentially there is not consistent. I don't know if it's, I mean, I know Dan's working hard to try to solve that, but when we put out the lease for that, I think it was our intention to not have a burden on the taxpayers. So,
You know what I'm surprised at a little bit is I went to a number of those meetings when Bridgewater was coming into town to, with a proposal to take over the former MacArthur School for a university presence here on the Cape. And they were adamant that they had done all kinds of market research and, you know, there was a real profound need for them. And, I mean, they just had this incredible level of confidence that they were needed and they were going to be able to get the students to support the school the way they thought. And it seems like they haven't been able to do that. And I'm wondering why. Is it the curriculum that they're, you know, the driving isn't meeting the needs of the locals? Is it that, you know, they're getting into union conflicts with the main campus versus, you know, this campus? Those kinds of things materialize sometimes. Do you know why, Dan, that they haven't been able to sustain themselves the way they thought they would?
From what they have told me was one of the significant things that didn't occur was when they went into that site, they had gotten a lot of brushback from 4Cs as it relates to coursework that would be offered there that would interfere or conflict or challenge the 4Cs associate's degree. So you took that right off the top. Second part of that would be they thought that there would be, you know, so if you can't do that kind of coursework, what could you do? So they figured continuing ed, there'd be an opportunity for teachers to get professional development points, some more, like I could get my associate's degree in, I don't know, applied business science at 4Cs and then transfer over to a program that would be complementary over here. That coupled with, in order to get curriculum here, you needed to get professors here. And they had some institutional problems having professors want to be part of a campus experience here. So I think on its face, they gave us exactly what in the environment that they had backed into, what they could give us. So now we're at a point where they were going to close it completely.
No, I know that, yeah.
So now they're just trying
I'm just so surprised that they're at this point, given their, you know, their assurances that they had really done a lot of marketing and some studies and
a huge investment, huge.
yeah.
Well, they have invested
Millions of dollars in that
fair
building.
sum of money.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, I mean, I think in general, the student body population on the Cape continues to erode significantly. But, you know, when you take away right out of the gate, like what I'd call basic college level course curriculum that they cannot, or they said they wouldn't compete with 4Cs on, then what are you left with? And then couple that with a professor base that potentially didn't want to commit to coming over here and having night classes.
They knew about the I mean, they represented that they were not going to infringe on 4Cs and they were going to work cooperatively with them and build on that associate's degree. And
Well,
I'm just surprised with all the teachers on the Cape, they can't service them in a way that would, you know, would support the institution in terms of getting graduate degrees or certifications. They mentioned in their presentations that they train more teachers in Massachusetts than any other college. I'm just surprised they're not
But our
being more
lease,
successful with that group.
our lease and our vision were balanced by the community benefit
Yeah,
and the fact that they were going to take care of the building.
yeah.
And now I don't think that we're on the same page in terms of the community benefit. One of the things is that they operate the building as a full part, basically an extension of their full university. 4Cs you can go to and you can take a college class, and you don't have to pay full tuition and fees. I registered for a class and started going over here. I got the bill. It wasn't just the class you have to pay for. You have to pay as if you're enrolled as a full-time student, tuition and fees to take one certificate class. That's a problem. I had to drop the class that I enjoyed very much because you can't really justify the thousands of dollars to take one class.
Right.
So that model just doesn't work. It works if you're taking 4 or 2 online classes and a class here, but that's an expensive proposition to take a class. So I think that that's one problem, but that's, I mean, it's a discussion for another night, but as long as.
I'm very comfortable with doing it that night if that's, you know.
I mean, I just mean in general, I think we should have a conversation about what the long term is.
I would agree. I think it's just a question of when.
If what Dan said, it will never be that, I mean, maybe we need to put the building back in the tax roll. I mean, if there's no benefit coming out of it and the taxpayers are still going to be responsible for the facility going forward,
Well,
maybe we need an end game.
I'd be kind of careful in that. Right now, we've only, or, you know, through conversations to get a 1-year lease extension, we identified insurance funds to fix the rest of the roof. So even if you wanted to not continue this relationship, the roof is in serious need of repair. So if we had any hope to do anything with the building, that it doesn't become a bigger liability than it already is, you still need to fix the roof. There's no question about that. So one of the problems with these big buildings is they don't meet code. They have a central heating plant, steam in this case, which nobody wants. You know, these are not easy. These would be hard buildings to repurpose in a robust, growing, what I'd call vibrant community with all sorts of economic development going on off Cape. But here, it becomes, you know, that coupled with, we've got Matakees, now we talked about Emmy Small. I mean, at this point, they're willing to continue to do work on the inside of the building. They've already been doing work to make more of the classroom spaces viable. And by the way, the building is loaded with asbestos and lead. So, I mean, I'm glad they're taking that on. I mean, frankly, you know, my best advice is let's get the roof done, see what they can do. They've invited the Cape Cod Collaborative in. We're trying to get some additional use as a community resource. And we're trying to do it in the most cost-effective way, but understand that the roof today needs to be fixed, no questions.
Yeah, I remember they let it was John Simpkins go in a state of disrepair and the roof was leaking and everything like that, and they didn't get a lot of money for it when they sold it.
You're lucky to just get rid of it without the cost of demolition.
I think it was $356,000. But it's on the taxes. The taxpayers aren't supporting that building anymore. And it had a community benefit.
Also, the time to do that, it would be worth more value if we wanted to go down that road to do that again with a good roof. Once you fix the roof and you stop the water from coming in, the building becomes exponentially more attractive to somebody that has a prospective development need, because they could get into the building and sit on it for a while without worrying about water coming in. But, I mean, that's a decision that, you know, the board would need to make a decision as to how you want to go forward on it.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to keep it without doing any further damage to the inside.
Well, I'm with Tracy. I think it would be helpful to have a discussion. I'd like to know what it's going to cost to fix the roof.
It's a
as well.
$140,000 estimate.
Really?
So
And
we
it's-
have identified insurance money to do that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That's
I
good.
thought there was money on town meeting for,
There was town meeting, that was money to bring a fiber source to the building and to assist with what I would call repairs on the inside that might be needed to get it in a position where it could be rented. And for instance, we used a few $1,000s to pay for the hazmat survey, because you can't do any repairs until you know what asbestos and lead situation is, and they were willing to go ahead and do some repairs, but they couldn't send their crews in there without having that information, so. I mean, it's kind of like a give and a take partnership to some degree. I know it didn't pan out as you were told it was going to, but that was 6 years ago, and things are different today.
I know, but I just don't want this year to be 300, next year's, oh, we need 500,000.
Oh, I wouldn't ask you for that.
I know, but I'm just saying, it's, you know, my vision was that they were gonna lease it for $1, and they were gonna take care of it. That's what I thought.
They put a lot of money into
And
it. I think they
I
said
know
more
they
than $1 million to make it viable to date, so.
I think a couple mil they put into it. All right, anybody else on the agenda? So we got a placeholder on the BSU review. That's it, I guess.
Yeah, one of the things at the next edition of this, I'll have filled out for you is article review. We'll have to go through the articles as a group to review those with you.
Okay, next thing is individual items. Anybody on the board have any individual items?
I have one.
Eric?
I'll kind of, this is a Mattakees school project that will be in addition to Dan's update if he has one, but I attended my first meeting, what was it, a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, Dan? Relatively uneventful, just trying to identify ways to, shave the $5 million, which is essentially the year and a half worth of escalation. So the one thing I wanted to bring to this board's attention is that they had been planning on a fee waiver, building permit fee waiver in the order of about $170,000. And I was texting Dan, who was 3 or 4 seats away from me, saying, I'm not sure that they should count on that just yet. Because we have had some discussions about significant fee waivers, especially when when the project creates a drain on town staff and other resources, which this project certainly will. So I'm not sure we want them to assume that we're going to forgive a portion or the entire building permit fee. So I just wanted to make you all aware that at some point that's probably, they took it off of their line item list of savings for now, but it will likely come back. And I just wanted to make you all aware that at some point we might be having that discussion. But the meeting went well. Yeah, I know that people are moaning and groaning about the cuts, but this is what I do for a living. I can tell you that 90% of the time, when you're forced to make cuts, the result is actually a better product. So, so that's that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Eric. And thanks for going to the meeting and representing the town on that. Anyone else?
I just want to
Tracy?
update the committee on last night's school committee meeting. They did go over the tentative list that was discussed of items for reductions. They were very careful to comment that they were looking at items that were non-reimbursable so that the reimbursement would get cut. So that's still a work in progress, but they voted a tentative budget last night, and as we know, this is a very, very tentative budget because they need a number to start with. It was $65,183,279,000. So it's an increase of $3.3 million.
About 5%?
I think it was a little bit less than that. But some of the budget, first of all, the DYEA, Educators Association contract has not yet been settled. That's one thing. The other thing that they did mention, and I'm sure the town probably already knows this, but this board may not, is that the municipal health group decided or voted to have no increase again.
They'll vote that tomorrow, hopefully.
Okay, so they're counting on that, which is, again, 2 years in a row is an amazing savings to every municipality on the Cape that benefits from it. Yes. They went over their items, all the different items that went up and down. So this is the handout from last night's meeting. the cherry sheets, you know, they talked a lot about the governor's budget, and obviously the governor's budget sounded amazing, right? So Chapter 70 had an increase of $376,000, so it sounded great, but what they don't tell you is that the bus, the regional transportation was reduced by $249,000. So really, the net is a negative. After reductions in special education, I mean, the special education was a little bit of an increase. But really, one of the really big increases from last year to this year in special education, but all payments to other schools, choice charter is a increase of $551,000. So we're up at $7.2 million in payments to other schools. That includes the collaborative and special education out in choice and charter, so.
What is the enrollment done?
So the enrollment number, I know Vita had asked about it, the projected enrollment number for 2021 is 3,000. Now, this is foundation, so this is all the students, not just what's in the school. Foundation enrollment for 2021 is 3,338, and for FY20, it was 3,388, so it's a reduction in 50 students. With the 5-year rolling average, it brings Yarmouth's percentage for this budget to 66.21 and Dennis's to 33.78 for the purposes of next year's budget. 33.78 Dennis, 66.21 Yarmouth.
What was it last year?
Well, last year it was based on a different formula.
I know,
This is I want to say we were at almost 67, so it was fairly close. Maybe 68, do you remember the percentage?
68.
Yeah, 67, 68, so it's a small reduction. But
About 2/3, 1/3.
so that's a starting place. They recognize that they have some work to do. So my only comments to them, as Vita mentioned, is I asked for a liaison, so that way we can have more communication during our budget cycle. And they noticed on here that our town meeting's back to Tuesday, so they asked if we would make sure we let as many people know as we can. And I've told them about the snippets. Hopefully we'll be able to do those pre-town meeting for our YouTube channel, which was very helpful, and all the different forms of information to get out. But yeah, May 28th, and then I let them know that the ballot will be May 19th, so. I think that was it. They talked about the new Student Opportunities Act that was enacted, and that's an additional amount of money for the district. I think it's about that $300 and something thousand, but you can't use it for programs that you currently have. You have to create new programs, so it has to be something new. So to Vita's point, I think the zero-based budgeting is something that they're by effect going to be forced to do. Based on the fact that new money has to go to new programs and not potentially programs that's the way I understood it, and maybe I'm wrong, but anyway, that's my update.
Thank you, Tracy. Anyone else? Norm? Mark?
Nope.
Okay, moving ahead to the consent agenda.
Yep, Mr. Chairman, there's some donations on there, also a license application for the Irish Fest, March 7th, 2020. Do we have a motion to accept that?
I'll move the consent agenda.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed? That passes unanimously. Town administrator updates.
Yeah, one update, we got a preliminary assessment from Cape Tech. It's just waiting for school committee vote. It looks like they're up 2.76%. Total dollar value to Yarmouth would be $4,090,207. So we're up a little bit there, more than anticipated. So we're going to need to make some adjustments to the budget now in advance of the DY situation.
What is that, 2.76 represent in dollars?
4090207.
That's the total. That's our
Total,
budget.
capital including operating.
And what did we project, 2.5%?
2.5.
So it's about 330,000 over,
How much?
about 330,000 over.
330?
Over our 2.5% increase.
He did say it wasn't going to happen again.
Yeah, we enjoyed the reductions while they lasted.
So one of the things we got to check with them on is whether or not that would be reflective of the health insurance situation.
I'm sure it is. Erin Orcott is on the board,
Yeah.
so she's well aware of.
So it could have been even worse, I
I think
think.
that's already included, counted? Yeah.
We'll make sure, but
How would that affect our debt allocation?
For the building? That was debt exclusion. So that just goes on to the tax.
I know, but is it up because of their budget's up, or is it up because their enrollment?
Bob's, I don't know what the numbers, Bob had more students, he told me, from Yarmouth.
So
occurring.
it does
Yeah.
affect our.
Yeah, I'll get a final count on the numbers. But he had warned us a while ago that our number of students was on the uptick, and it's likely with the new building it'd go up even more. So. Next one is a decision for you on February 5th or 12th. Been asked by Public Works Director Colby to identify a date for you to participate in the DPW building groundbreaking ceremony. So either the 5th or the 12th would be good dates for the contractor.
Of what month?
February.
Is it Wednesdays? Is that true? Yes?
Yeah, sounds like it. Yeah. I don't have the time yet, but it was just more right now they want to nail down the dates.
I work both days.
I
so-
know. So we could do the afternoon, late
Yeah,
afternoon, right?
I think I could do either
Okay.
day.
Sounds good.
Damn job of yours.
I don't really get to know my social life.
So you're thinking like the 12th, maybe?
Keep playing the lottery.
this is a social.
Either way.
Nick's birthday.
Whose birthday?
Whose?
Nick Exaros. I don't know if anything happened that day.
12th?
Yeah, I just need to know what date you want to go.
We could be trekking, there could be some snow on the ground.
God, I hope not.
Let's hope not.
Either day works for me.
Mike, Norm, Mark?
If the proposal is the afternoon of the 12th to accommodate Tracy, that works for me.
Depends on what time. I can't do, from 2 o'clock on, I'm pretty well covered with appointments.
Both days? The 12th and the 5th?
The 5th, I'm not in town.
So are you pitching Wednesday? Well,
I make a motion that Mike be our representative at the groundbreaking ceremony.
Denied.
I'll second.
Motion to adjourn.
I'll second that.
So is one date better than the other for the board members who might be able to make
Well, the
it?
only time that Norm can do it is in the morning of the 12th, which excludes Tracy. I hate being the sort of the meeting organizer, because usually it's
Yeah, Norm can't do it on the
someone
fifth.
doesn't.
The 5th
What
is
day?
actually better.
What's that, Eric?
The 5th is actually better for me.
Can you do the afternoon of the 5th, Mark?
Yeah. I'll work around your schedule, sure. The 5th, no problem. You talking about the afternoon, Eric? That's what you were saying, Eric.
Yeah, I mean, I
Tracy?
understand
Yeah.
Norm's not here, but I'm just throwing it out there.
I think it's good for as many board members
The
that
5th is
can
the
make
better
it.
option for me.
Yeah.
I guess that leaves Mike maybe as a decision.
Mike, what do you think? The 5th, afternoon?
I'll check my schedule. I don't have it with me, but if I'm open, I'll be there, you know.
All right, well, I want to put something in my calendar. What do we have for
I just don't know what I have on for court on those 2 dates. I'll check.
So we're now looking at the 5th, right, the afternoon? Sometime in the
I'll
afternoon?
send you the email on that.
Okay. Before it gets dark, so we're looking at around, at the latest.
4 o'clock at the latest, yeah.
I'll put potential.
The,
You got gloves, Eric? I don't want you to.
I have a hard hat and gloves.
So is this one of these bring your own hard hat things?
I just don't want to get a splinter.
I'm hoping to get a hard hat and gloves from every building committee that I sit on. So eventually I can outfit the entire board.
the only, the last thing I got is, two things. The building fees topic, that's probably going to come back sooner rather than later in that, at some point, that building committee's going to need to report to MSBA what the total cost reduction value was. So I'd like to be able to kind of get a decision on that maybe by the next full board meeting in the middle of February. They kind of left a date open when we'd have to decide it, but it needs to be within probably 30 days or so is the sense that I got.
So we've got a month to procrastinate.
Well, you got like a couple weeks, but if if it has to be a month, it has to be a month, I suppose.
So that's over the course of, what, a 15 months, so it could be in more than one fiscal year, correct?
The payment of the fee is paid usually at the front,
Upfront,
right, yeah,
yeah.
except for like as you college, you need additional inspections. So that would go into the budget for next year if it were to be accepted, so.
I don't know, we have the ability to even plan for that in their budget?
I wouldn't personally, I wouldn't build the town budget around that. It just would be a local receipt that if it came in above what we would normally anticipate, that's a benefit to the town.
I mean, do we know how many real man-hours? That's going to be
It's going to
significant.
be significant, there's no question. That's correct.
Thousands.
Yeah.
It's a lot of work.
So you want to prepare a recommendation for the board?
Yeah, I can probably take a look at what that would look like,
Why would we have to absorb the full impact of that?
because
I don't want to say anything about
it's under our jurisdiction, but I suppose if you assess the cost through at full freight, in a way, it's being partially funded by Dennis, I suppose, right?
Right.
And, I brought it up because in the past, we have, where inspections and town resources were involved, we have decided not to waive these types of fees.
So that's been our policy for a while.
It has.
Yeah.
I don't remember why it came up, but. it
Well,
came
the
up.
church, it started with the church.
Oh,
That
that's
was-
right. St. Pius, that's when we first
They
started.
wanted a huge waiver.
Really?
Yeah.
I mean, I think you're right, our position was things that actually aren't costing the town, like,
Like a parade permit.
yeah, something that didn't use man-hours, we were more flexible upon, but something like that would really devastate our budget in terms of the time that it would take. So, I know that probably doesn't look good as the host community. I'm sure a lot of communities are able to do something, but
So I think if I remember the math correctly, we were, with that, without waiving that fee, we're about $260,000+ short of reaching the $5 million savings number. So essentially what that would say is if we didn't waive the fees, we'd have to go back into the project and come out and dig out like 260+ more thousands of dollars worth of reductions. Now, that being said, the architectural team was continuing to work on the plan to see within their plan diagram they could make some alterations without doing any further deductions, just by configuring the interior spaces such that it could make construction more efficient. They were looking at that. We're waiting to have a report at the next meeting as to what further. So, I mean, the theory would be if they came back and covered the 260, you'd be in pretty good shape to not waive the fee,
well, I mean, Yarmouth's bearing the 100% of the burden for a district school, so, I mean, I think that maybe we need to have a conversation, maybe outside of how, if we were able to do some small reduction or level of reduction that we'd be able afforded to do, how Dennis would help us with that. Maybe it's too complicated to not do through the project, like Mark said. I mean, it is a project expense.
It's a
but-
project expense, right? 65/35. Right?
What are our actual incremental costs?
Well, the fee structure, if I remember correctly, for building department was generally set such that it, I want to say, covered 80% of their operating expenses, including their benefits load. So I suppose to some degree, you could say that if that were to hold true 4 or 5 years after that process, then roughly, all in on that, the entire fees package, 80% of 170 would cover the full load of the department's staff that needs to work on that. I mean, that is a macro way of doing that, but
Well, I'm talking actual out-of-pocket costs. What additional out-of-pocket costs would we incur as a result of the permitting process?
well, it's the labor associated with the workforce doing the work.
Would we have to hire additional people?
We wouldn't hire additional people, it would
That's
just
my
be,
point.
yeah,
And so there's no incremental additional cost.
no.
So the question is waiver of revenue.
That's correct.
Not waiver, and not a fact that actual costs would increase. And it's revenue that we don't currently have.
It's revenue that we don't currently budget for, that's correct.
So there's no incremental cost, and we're being asked to waive incremental revenue.
Would it be typical, well, I guess the man-hours count, because if the man-hours are going to be such that they're going to have to work overtime to get the rest of their work done, then there is subsequent cost to it.
Well, there could be that. I mean, obviously, we would structure their workload such that that would not likely be the case. So in many instances, project meetings and whatnot would be held obviously during the workday. I mean, it's hard to know these things right now because the project hasn't gotten to the point where we can even, with a great degree of surety, tell you that that 170 number is the number until it all is fully designed up and we know what it looks like, so. But you don't need to make a decision tonight. It's just something that's on the horizon. And that's it.
Make a motion to adjourn?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned.